Okay, thank you very much. It is wonderful to be here in sunshine. I have not had sunshine in about a week. And even though we are in Texas, yes, they do close campus. And we had the campus closed part of Monday and then a late start on Tuesday. So even though you think Texas never gets bad weather, we do. And that snow has made it further south, and when we get ice, everything just has to close because nobody knows how to handle it. But I'm delighted to be here with you today, and we're going to talk about what role does the boss play. And in my particular talk, I have 3 different research projects that I want to share some information with you from these different research projects. The first one is to look at what you should expect in your very first job. So for those of you that have not worked in the IT arena yet, what kind of things can you expect from that? The second project is what can we learn from interviews with female CIOs? And I'm currently working on a research project with a graduate student, and we have been interviewing different female CIOs to get their perspective with regard to the position that they hold in their different organizations. And then the last question that I want to answer is, what role does mentoring play for non-minority and minority employees? And that is another study that I have been working on in terms of looking at different races that are in the IT arena and what factors are influencing them with regard to those mentoring relationships. So what should you expect in your first job? What I have done is to interview 46 IT new hires. These were all students that graduated from Baylor with a degree in MIS. And I asked them, what challenges did you face in your new job? So in terms of some of the challenges that they talked about, I chose 3 that I thought might be the most enlightening and helpful with regard to what you may face. And I also want to address and have you give me some suggestions for how you might address these particular challenges when you get in the marketplace and when you're out there taking that very first job. What are some practical things that you could do? And we'll open up the floor for me to get your suggestions and let us brainstorm about that a little bit. One of the very first things that the students commented about, and I know that we have engineering, we have computer science, we have MIS, but we heard repeatedly that a lot of times the employers did not necessarily distinguish between the different degrees, whether it was an MIS degree, whether it was a computer science degree, or whether it was an engineering degree. The employers sort of just lumped all of that together. Well, that can be a real challenge if you're expected to do a more computer science-oriented job, but you've been trained in MIS and you have more experience with regard to understanding what the business is and what the different business processes are versus the actual particulars in terms of the programming. A second skill is achieving work-life balance. And then, not a skill, I'm sorry, a challenge. And then the third one was integrating into the work environment. So what I'm going to present now in terms of these 3 different challenges are some specific examples of quotes that the students gave to me when I was interviewing them. Okay, here's the very first one. The guy that I replaced was a seasoned computer science major, and now you're hiring me to do this job, but I'm only an MIS guy, touching the surface of programming. That prior employee had been taught over 10 different programming languages, and I avoid programming like the plague. So whenever things need to be done macro-wise, it's always an uphill battle because you have management who's saying, okay, well, this person did this, the person that was in the job before you got it, they were able to do it, so why can't you do that? This was one of the challenges that we saw over and over with regard to what our students were telling us. Another example here, as far as my department, they would see more value in a super techie computer science person, or I guess engineering, really technical. However, I do bring an edge with having the business background and seeing the bigger picture. All right, so this is coming from an MIS major But I find these really interesting because we try to talk as faculty with the companies that are coming to hire our students to be sure that they understand what the training those particular students have received. But as academicians and as different university faculty, this is an area where I know that we could do a better job in terms of helping those people that are doing the hiring when they're coming in. So let's brainstorm together with how you think you can minimize this skill confusion if you are going out and getting a job and that first job is different than what you thought it was going to be with regard to what their expectations are. Okay, this is interaction time, okay? This is your turn to get to tell me some things you think that might be helpful. Yes?
Give companies a better outlook on what MIS is in reality.
Okay, give companies a better outlook on what MIS is in reality. Good. So you have to sort of educate the company in a way.
People don't know what MIS is.
That's true. A lot of people don't. Yes?
So when you're interviewing or when you're interacting with a recruiter, you tell them that what was your motivation to take up MIS as a degree or major. So they would understand that MIS is not just technical skills, it's also it's somewhere on the crossroads between technical and management.
And management. Okay, so share with them the technical and the management side, both in terms of the skills that you have. Yes? Knowing your job before you apply for it. Okay, how do you go about doing that?
You can talk to the recruiter, ask the roles and responsibilities that come with the position.
Okay, ask specifically roles and responsibilities. All right.
I have the same point.
Okay, and you?
Just adding on to those pointers Sunil made, that setting the expectations right with the manager.
Okay.
Will be working.
Setting the expectations right with the manager. And then someone else had their hand up. Yes?
Skill confusion should be clear within the candidate's mind first. So there is already the division of labor is outside there, and while applying, only you should target those positions.
Okay, so the skills required for that position need to be clear to the candidate. You need to be knowing exactly what it is that you are looking at in terms of doing that particular job. All right, good. Does anybody have an experience from an internship or a prior employer where you could share with us something that happened that was like this? Okay, it's fine if you don't. I didn't know if some of you did or if you didn't. All right, so the next challenge they had was achieving work-life balance. I'm expected to work 48 hours per week as my base. I work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Then there are times when I also have to work on Saturdays or until 2 in the morning. I work with people in Bangalore, so there are times when people are waking me up with a call at 5 or 6 a.m. because the application doesn't work. All right? So there was also a lack of understanding on some of our students' part with regard to what their work-life balance was going to be whenever they took their positions. Programming isn't a 40-hour-a-week job. It's kind of difficult for me to grab the fact your work schedule is going to fluctuate depending on what area of the life cycle it is. This was talking about the systems development life cycle for the different projects that the student was on. You're 2 weeks away from delivery. You might work 70 hours per week or 60 hours per week. If you're at the beginning, you might be working a lot less than that, the beginning of a new project. So that was kind of a weird getting accustomed to thing in terms of looking and realizing that, oh, we're not in school anymore. It is continual learning. You've entered a field that is definitely going to require you to learn from now until you die in terms of information systems because of the rate at which it changes. But there's also some expectation that the employer is going to have of you with regard to taking that very first job. Not to scare anyone off, that's not what I'm trying to do, but just to let you be aware of what those expectations might be. All right, how do you prepare for this new lifestyle? So again, this is interactive time. What do you think would be some ways to help you get prepared for that when you go and take that first job? Yes?
Do not set your expectations really high.
Do not set expectations really high?
Yeah, because you're entering a
Okay, just going with the flow, realizing, acknowledging that you've got a lot to learn in terms of that new place that you're going into. Yes?
Contact someone from like an alumni group that works in the field, like a mentor, you understand, you can ask them all these questions.
Right, great. Great suggestion. Contact someone that went to the same university you did, that works at that organization, so that you can ask them questions. Yes?
You need to find a deeper motivation for why you're doing what you're doing. Cycle for companies that are really successful, like that's what they expect. So if you want to be a part of something like that, that's what you have to do.
Right. So you need to acknowledge that this is an expectation and this is what you're going to have to do. If that's not what you're interested in, if that's not the team that you signed up to play on, then maybe you need to rethink some things. Okay? Good. Yes?
Prioritizing the important things that you need to finish off first to maintain the work-life balance.
Okay, prioritizing things in terms of your work-life balance. What do you need to finish first? What do you not need to finish? Or what can you put on hold for later? All right? All right, be informed. I had a couple of ideas here, but I think some of you have already shared that. And we can be informed in a wide variety of ways by being sure that we have talked with other people that are there at that company, asking a lot of questions, all right, talking to those recent graduates, focusing on the positive. All right, what do you think I mean by that in terms of focusing on the positive? Not focusing on the negative. I love that. That was a great answer. Yes, you're right. Not focusing on the negative. Yes.
Learning part.
The learning part, okay? You enjoy learning new things, and you're always going to have the opportunity to learn new things, so that ends up being, you can focus on that as a positive. Okay, what's the one big thing you're going to be getting now that you didn't get while you were in school? Oh yeah, now we're getting paid to do this job, you know, that's a good thing. And salaries that you come out making, those are also very good things. But they don't offer these big salaries without a price to go with them in terms of understanding where you are. All right, and then another concept is stage of life issues, all right? And one I wanted to share about this, I have one son, and he's 27 years old. He graduated in MIS from the University of Arkansas, and he currently is a business analyst, and he works for ConocoPhillips. He started in Houston and did 1 year in Houston, and then he moved to Anchorage, Alaska. And he's been in Anchorage for 4 years now. One of the very first things that he had to do in that particular job was to do support for geologists, geophysicists, and chemists. And he was doing some development of a database for all of these engineering type people and scientific people. And I remember him calling one day and saying, "Mom, I got this database and I cannot tell you what 2 fields are in that database. I have no idea." He said, "I wasn't trained in chemistry. I wasn't trained in geophysics." I said, "Well, you're just going to have to ask questions, and you're going to have to start digging, and you have to learn on your own. And you've got to catch up in terms of if this is what they've assigned you to do, then jump on and start asking questions and figure it out." And so he's single. He's able to work a lot of hours. At his stage of life right now, no family, no children, it's not a big deal in terms of how he can adjust his work-life balance to give to that organization and to build that rapport with those people that he's working with in terms of becoming a very good employee for them. Now, I would suspect that someday, 10 years from now, when he's got small kids, he may move into a different position and one that doesn't require as many hours as this particular one does. That's what I mean in terms of a stage of life issue, is that you have to acknowledge what stage of life that you are currently in. So if some of you have a family and you're going into that job and you have other responsibilities outside of being a single individual, those types of things you need to consider with regard to what your work-life balance might be and in terms of expectations for that job. All right, the last one in terms of integrating into the environment, and I chuckle at this one. There's definitely going to be some age differences between many of you and those that you're going to go work with. It was a bunch of guys. Most of them were older. I think they kind of clicked with each other better. They talked about their past job experiences. I was kind of just sitting there like, oh, I don't really have anything to talk about with you guys. I don't like football. It was just weird. All right, so this particular individual was having a lot of challenges in terms of integrating into that work environment with other people that he was on a team with, working on a particular project. How do you address that generational gap that might be there? Well, one thing is to note that there are currently 4 generations in the workforce. All right, so when you go out there and you take that new job, you've got to realize that we have got the full gamut in terms of people that are in the workforce. All right, so if you think of your grandparents, all right, there's still some of your grandparents' age out there that are in the workforce. And those may be people that you're going to be working with when you go out there. So that is very different than thinking about how you all love to communicate. So with regard to the Generation Y, what's one of your favorite ways to communicate with each other?
Social media.
Social media, all right? But your grandparents, some of them are catching on, and some of them are beginning to do some of that now, but it hasn't been to the same extent that you are, all right? In terms of levels of communication, and I'm going to address some more things on communication later in the talk, but in terms of those different levels, what is the most rich form of communication? Face-to-face communication. What is the least rich form of communication? Okay, social networking, texting, instant messaging, all right? So those are the least rich forms of communication. Any of you received an email where what the person intended wasn't anything like what you read that email to be? Yeah, okay. So, and looking at thinking through what we've got in terms of the workplace with these 4 different generations out there, if you have someone that's on your team that is in the upper 50s age category, what do you think is going to be one of the best ways that you probably should be communicating with them? Probably in person, all right? Because of that communication skill in terms of all of the nonverbal skills that we can, or nonverbal cues that we can get when we're actually seeing face-to-face versus just sending a text message or some kind of an email. All right, so fitting in with that wide variety of generations, what are some other practical things that might help you in knowing that we're going to the workplace? What would be some suggestions that you might have? No suggestions? Tell me some things. What do you think, what do you might appreciate about your grandparents? What do you appreciate about that particular age group of people?
Recognize their experience.
Okay.
Their difference.
Recognize their experience and their differences. But are those differences bad?
No.
No, they're not bad. Are they different from you? Of course they are. But we can embrace that. What else?
Well, their wisdom and like I said, their experience.
Their wisdom. Yeah, they've been there. They've had a lot of life experiences that you haven't had yet, and you can learn from that.
Yeah, sharing your knowledge and learned. Even like our generation can share some technology, like skills and stuff like that.
Right, right. So we need to look at it as that you're on a team, and you've got to work together on this team so that we can, as a team, work to benefit the company. Not be afraid of those differences, but rather embrace those differences. Now, that all sounds good. I know it's hard to do. And it's a skill that you can learn, and it's a skill that you can work on. And if you are knowledgeable of the fact that this is the first time and ever that we've had this many generations in one workforce in the United States. And that's a very different, it causes a lot of different dynamics that we've not faced before. And that companies and organizations haven't faced before. But if you know about it, And if you know that you need to develop skills to be able to communicate with people from a wide variety of generations that talk differently than you do, that have had different experiences, embracing that is a good way to do it. All right. Here is another quote from a student. They don't like when you act like you know everything because we don't have experiences as fresh graduates. Just be quiet and listen. There's a lot of things I think the military should change, like process, but they've been doing it for a long time. So I think let's just keep my mind open and listen. All right, so here was an example where someone felt like they should just be observing and listening and not necessarily being so participative. There's going to be times where you're going to do both, where you need to speak up and you need to share some information and you need to share some of your knowledge with someone else that may not have that knowledge. But then you have to be discerning about when are the appropriate times to do both of those. That's not always an easy skill to learn, but it is one that you can learn. All right, this one, understanding technical people, has been a challenge for me. Learning how to communicate in that aspect with people who are not very social, and I think that is a little curve I had to learn. All right, so this particular person was thrown in working with a lot of very technical people and did not know how to necessarily ask the appropriate questions to get the input from those people. All right, so it's understanding that different people, again, have different strengths, and to acknowledge those strengths and to know when to ask the appropriate questions and when to just observe. Yes?
Just I would point out that I wouldn't go as far as to generalize that all technical people are not social.
No, that's true.
Yeah, just saying.
You are correct. This is a generalization. Not all technical people lack social skills. So I acknowledge that. I'm just pulling what this particular student said. But you are right. A lot of technical people do have good social skills. And then also some comments were made about learning how to integrate into the culture of the company and how to fit that particular culture. So we've talked about if you could go and talk to some of the other people that work in that organization, find out some different things about the culture of that organization. An example that I'll give you from ConocoPhillips, they are very safety oriented. If you are on your cell phone in the parking garage in Houston, Texas for ConocoPhillips and you get caught, you will be reprimanded as an employee. That's a part of their culture, is that safety orientation. There are things you learn that you're just not supposed to do. And that's very hard for a lot of people because they love to have those cell phones right there with them, even in the parking garage. So you just have to learn what that culture is for that organization. Another thing about safety is if in ConocoPhillips they want you to hold the stair rail when you're walking on stairs. That's another aspect of the safety component in terms of that organization. There'll be some companies that's not what their culture is, but that's just an example to give you. All right. Now, we also asked the students, what are some of your strategies for overcoming the challenges that you have faced? First one, mastering technical to abandon the technical, being proactive, having a long-term career focus, and utilizing resources. All right, so mastering the technical to abandon the technical. Programming is not my ideal job, so I'm trying to get as much experience as I can from doing what I'm doing now, which is programming, so that I can move into a management role at some point or move into an analyst role. Okay, so this person realized the necessity of having strong and good programming skills because they weren't going to go in and start as a manager. They had to start in more of an entry-level position, but they wanted to move up into management, but this was one of those necessary steps to get there. I challenged myself with developing into a better overall person for the company by strengthening my technical skills. And you can tell this is coming from MIS graduates that haven't had as much focus on the technical as what maybe computer science has. The department they ended up being in was one of the most technical departments. The goal was to be on the business side, but I need to understand the technical side in order to be able to do that. Okay, in terms of being proactive, it is a continuous learning experience. If the company is doing things right, then they're going to train you with whatever skills you need to do the job that you're assigned to. Don't be afraid of learning those new skills. All right? Here is one example where this student thought that the company would offer the training, but I can tell you that there's a lot of times that the company's not going to give you the training. They're going to expect you to know it, and you have to get to that level of competency on your own. Okay? So that we heard examples that way as well, that it's you being self-motivated and you going out there buying books, reading books, joining organizations, learning different languages from a wide variety of places. You need to take initiative. I need someone to take the lead on this or look for this information. If that's an email that you get, be willing to respond and be willing to step up to the plate. Showing initiative, they said that was a very important thing with regard to how to overcome some of these challenges in the job. Even if you didn't know how to do it, then you could ask someone, get help, get assistance. And then a long-term career focus. Looking at the long term where you want to be and realizing again in terms of stage of life that this is not permanent, this is not forever. If I have goals to be in upper management, there are certain things that I have to do before I can get there. And realizing that in terms of what you're looking at towards positions for the future. This particular student was, of course, being sure to be very positive towards the faculty that were interviewing them and saying that I have to say that I, like you guys did, prepare me very well for understanding there are many aspects, and there are. The IT field is so huge. If you don't know what your first assignment might be, there are so many other options to move. Another thing is a lot of these organizations, you move every 12 months, you may move every 18 months, every 24 months in terms of taking different positions within the organization. That's how you advance, but realizing that it may be not that long of a period of time that you may be in a particular position. So you need to be flexible. That's another important aspect of what they've said. Last thing is in terms of utilizing resources, going to internet sites, looking up information, sitting down with other team members, building a good rapport with those team members so that they can help you and you can work together. And that way, there wasn't a class to go to and learn it. It was basically, this is how it works and this is how you get it done in terms of looking at where those resources are. Okay, use useful tools to learn. This example was from different internships. I'm sure that they focus on internships in your program and having multiple internships if that's possible in terms of you getting exposure to different companies and learning different things in terms of what you can get off of an internal website within that organization to help you on a particular project. So this one was an example of someone that was having trouble with a spreadsheet, and so after about 8 hours working on that particular spreadsheet and doing a lot of searching, they finally figured it out. And then the sense of accomplishment that they felt in terms of that self-motivated and self-learning. That was a very positive part. Okay, that was one particular study. Now this second study is a study I'm doing with female CIOs. And I wanted to share some of the things that we can learn from their particular perspective. All right. I've interviewed 4 different female CIOs to date, and my graduate student is interviewing another one at a large organization in Austin, Texas today. One of those was the CIO of an international theme park and a vacation resort. Another one was from an engineering firm, and another one was from a transportation firm in terms of these that I have interviewed so far and to this point. And then also a private university that has about 1,500 employees. And one of the questions that I asked was, what is your hope for future professionals entering the workforce? So I've asked this of all the different female CIOs that I have interviewed. And of course, first thing on the list is of good communication skills. what advice they can give to the next generation, and then their benefits of having a mentor, looking at that aspect. All right, this one CIO commented that the past CIO of that organization, he was viewed as a technology person. He talked lingo to the senior leaders that was really confusing. That was probably why a lot of the frustrations existed, because they couldn't understand what his strategies were. All right, so here, what is this illustrating as a very important part of your ability to communicate? What do you have to be able to explain in an understandable way? Know your audience. Okay, that's very important. So this particular CIO could not use necessarily all of the technical lingo with all the other people in the C-suite with him. He had to be able to explain it in a way that they could understand. All right? So having the ability to explain tough technical concepts in a way that other people can easily understand those. All right? This one was also talking about the fact that she didn't ever have to raise her voice. She could just speak whatever the truth was, quietly, clearly, and calmly, and everyone listened. I captured this quote because I think it's important. What does it say about your emotional state in terms of good communication skills?
Confidence.
Okay, having confidence, yes, that's very important. What else?
You're not trying to convince the other person just because you want to put your point forth.
Okay, you're not necessarily trying to convince the other person just because you're trying to put your point forth. Okay, and then you don't have to get emotional about it. Just be calm in terms of sharing what your particular view or your particular stand is. Okay, this particular quote is illustrating the fact that this CIO was very intentional about knowing the names of all the different people in the company. She didn't acknowledge that she had them all down, but that personal touch in terms of knowing individuals' names. Again, this is a skill that can be learned and that you have to work on, but that's very important in terms of being a good communicator. And I know it's just a very simple tip, but I think that that's a good one. When you get that first job and you get put on a project team, quickly try to learn everybody's name and learn something about them on that particular project team that you might be working on. All right? So I thought that was a good piece of advice. Advice to the next generation. Be sure that you're growing and that you're learning. Don't be consumed with yourself and trying to prove a point that you miss the opportunities to learn that are going on around you. You can learn as much from other people of what to do as well as what not to do. All right? So this goes hand in hand with regard to the culture of the company and understanding about the culture of the company and how the different ways that you can learn within that organization. I also had to recognize, and again, this is a CIO saying this, that when I didn't know something, you have to know what you know. You get smarter as you get older, hopefully, and you recognize when you don't know something, and then that is okay too. It's all right if you don't know it all. Don't be threatened by that. Instead, learn what you don't know, acknowledge what you don't know, and then be willing to do whatever's necessary in order for you to learn that and overcome that particular challenge or that gap you might have. Keep an open mind and persevere. Okay? There's some great opportunities that are out there, and even in the act of having to persevere or struggle or work through something in order to master it, your bosses and those around you will notice that, and they will acknowledge that as well. So I think that's a very good thing. All right, what are some of the benefits of having a mentor? You have to have a mentor, or when you have a mentor, this is someone that you can learn and you can grow from. Another CIO commented about the fact that there was more than one mentor in her life, and she had a different set of mentors at different stages of her life, depending on what her own personal goals were. Another one said that males and females are resistant to reaching out to people, but that's a compliment. When somebody calls and says, could you give me some advice? I mean, most people aren't going to say, no, I don't have time for that. All right? So I wanted to ask, with regard to female CIOs, let's talk about why this mentoring part is important for them. What kind of aspects for a woman that is in the C-suite in an area that's not necessarily female dominated, in fact it's the opposite, why would the mentoring be an important aspect for her? Yes? Are you raising your hand? No? Oh, shucks, I thought you were.
Reaching out for help is not necessarily a sign of weakness.
Reaching out for help is not necessarily a sign of weakness. Okay, that's correct. Very good.
You can give her an outside look of what's happening around her.
Okay, get her an outside look of what's happening around her. Let's talk about what kind of mentors would she need. Do you think she needs only mentors within her organization or some outside of her organization? She needs both of those. Okay. What about mentors for her career versus mentors for understanding her particular organization and the dynamics that are going on in the C-suite of her organization? Okay, definitely need some both of those in that particular area. All right, I'm sharing this about a CIO for the fact that that's about as high as you can go in terms of an organization in IT. And if this is advice that they're giving and they are at the top in terms of where the organizational structure is, how much more important is it for new people going into an organization? All right? And I think that's a very important aspect of it. All right. In terms of this third study that I had on mentoring and the relationship with the boss and the organizational commitment, this is a study where I surveyed over 500 IT workers in a Fortune 500 food production company. And I got a response rate about 52%. This was a very good response rate because the CIO supported this particular research project that I did in this organization. And he was the one that sent the emails out to get the IT workers to participate. The division is about 79% of them are men. And then here you can also see the majority were white, but yet we had some Hispanics, Asians, blacks, Native Americans, and another category as well. So even though I realize the other percentages on the race are small compared to the Caucasians, the one thing that this study allowed me to do that is very rare is to be able to have data that is representative of a wide variety of races. And as a researcher, that was a real plus of what I had on this particular study. The average time they'd been with their company was over 9 years. Right. In terms of ethnic minority populations, I pulled this slide in to say, why is it important for us to understand and us to be able to get along with a wide variety of people? All right. In terms of looking at this, by 2015, 20% of the population of the UK is going to be ethnic minorities. 42% of the population of New Zealand will be ethnic minorities. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 57% in 2060 is what the proportion of the population of the United States will be in terms of ethnic minorities. And currently in the U.S., African Americans and Hispanics are 30% of the population of the workforce, but only 14% of that in terms of IT workers. All right? So as we look to continuing to increase in terms of working in a global marketplace, and I was talking to some people earlier about positions they would like to go and take in Europe or getting to travel and go to different countries, the ability to work with a wide variety of people that may be from different cultures than you are is very important. In terms of organizational performance, Bell has done some research with regard to global markets, and some of the importance of ethnic diversity is to cultivate market intelligence. Right? What does that mean, cultivate market intelligence? What do you think? If you think about from a marketing standpoint, and looking at different products and how you want to put those different products into different maybe market groups or niche groups. Those products that might be purchased by one particular sector of the population versus those in another. Okay? If we're working in a global marketplace, having that type of market intelligence is very important, and you need a wide variety of a diverse workforce within your organization to be able to gain that and to have that. All right? It also helps to broaden networks, enhance language capabilities. In terms of mentoring, in the whole mentoring arena, there's two broad categories of mentoring. One is called psychosocial mentoring, and the other one is called career mentoring. The psychosocial mentoring is someone that's more like a coach or a counselor. They're cultivating a close relationship with you. In the workplace, it is someone that's helping you to learn the culture of the company, someone else in that particular workplace. Versus a career mentor may be someone outside of the organization that helps you and gives you advice about developing your career, how you advance it. How do I build my professional network? Do I need to be a part of an organization where I can build that particular network? So like the Society for Information Management. Do I go to meetings for that in the evening in order to build that particular network? All right. And I think I addressed this already, so I'll skip this in terms of the psychosocial mentor and a career mentor. In terms of relationship with the boss, there's a concept called leader-member exchange, LMX, in terms of looking at that relationship with the boss. And those people that have a strong and a high relationship in terms of LMX, they share mutual trust and they share mutual respect with one another. This was another component that I looked at in terms of, in addition to the mentoring, to see about that subordinate, superior relationship that was there. And then an organizational commitment refers to an individual's psychological attachment to the particular organization. I was studying the commitment to the organization so that would counter turnover and someone leaving the organization and going somewhere else. That was one of the things that the CIO wanted me to look at in that. So the importance of organizational commitment is to minimize that turnover, because we know it's very expensive to go out and to hire new employees and the costs that you have from that. All right, with the results of this is that the career mentoring influenced organizational commitment much more for the women and the minorities than it did for the non-minorities. The career mentoring was more important. The leader membership exchange, that relationship that you had with the boss and influencing career organizational commitment, was much stronger for the minorities than it was for the non-minorities in terms of this particular study and what these findings were. And then that psychosocial mentoring did not influence the organizational commitment at all in terms of what I found on this particular study. So what do those projections mean for you and for your future? Understanding the global marketplace is going to be very important. Being willing to learn about these different cultures and embracing them. Different study abroad opportunities that you might still have while you're still in school, to go to different countries, experience those cultures, learn new things. That can help set you apart from others that you may be competing with in the marketplace. And then also, as we look to being more productive in a global economy, your ability to have multiple conversational languages, not necessarily just programming language, is another aspect that can open some job opportunities for you. Okay, let's look at the questions right quick on the quiz. So number one, which of the following is not a strategy given by former students for addressing challenges of a new job in IT? And it was B, struggles of work-life balance. Good. And 2, there are 4 generations currently working in the U.S. workforce. What is the following is a suggestion for success from a female CIO? Communication skills. C, that's correct. Which type of mentoring was most important for women and minority?
Career mentor.
A, the career mentoring. Good, you are doing great. And which of the following is not a challenge the interviewed new hires in IT face? C, learning to speak a foreign language. You have been a great audience. Thank you very much for your participation. I appreciate it.